across America. Live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining us. It is the Monday edition of Point of View. And first off, we're going to be talking about a conference that you may want to attend or else certainly watch online, which is taking place this weekend. It's put on by our friends at the Discovery Institute. A little bit later this hour, we're going to be talking with Kevin McCullough, fellow talk show host, as really we've talked about many of his columns. Will give us a chance to spend some time with him. Next hour, Chris Harper will be with us in studio. We're going to talk about men's ministry. Before we're done, posted a good piece on the best of America on ice after the Olympics, so we have lots to cover. But this weekend is the Science and Faith Conference that takes place here in Dallas, and it is February 28th, endowed by our Creator. Now, some of the speakers there include a variety of people that we've had on this program, people like Ben Carson, Dr. Stephen Meyer, who I'm going to talk with in just a minute. Michael Egner was on with us recently. We also, of course, will have there Casey Luskin. We've interviewed him. Wesley J. Smith, of course, also Nancy Piercy, John West. I mean, the who's who of individuals that we've interviewed here on Point of View will all be there. You can get a chance to meet them face to face. But again, I recognize many of you around the country are saying, well, I'm probably not going to be able to make it to Dallas by Saturday. There's a way that you can live stream this. There's a way in which you can have a group gathering to actually watch these and interact with them. And so I thought it would be good to bring back to the microphone Dr. Stephen Meyer, individual that received his PhD from the University of Cambridge, former geophysicist and college professor. We've spent a fair amount of time in the last couple of months and years now talking about his book, Return of the God Hypothesis. Before that, Signature in the Cell, Darwin's Doubt. And I know, Steve, you're just getting back from being overseas, but thank you for giving us a few minutes today to talk about the conference.
I'm delighted to talk to you, even if I'm a little jet lagged.
Well, when you're jet lagged, you're like the rest of us because you certainly are this incredible intellect. And I guess to be fair, I've got to mention that, first of all, I've known you since before you went to Cambridge. Your wife actually taught my oldest daughter at Schofield Christian School, so we've known each other a long time. And in case people say, well, are you going to go to the conference? Yes, I've already signed up for the conference. Liberty McCarter, who is our co-host, she has signed up, and she's bringing her science-interested son because he's, I guess, under the age of 12, so he comes in free. But you've put together quite a conference, and every one of them are certainly good, but this one has the theme of endowed by our Creator. So tell us more.
Well, right. Many of our conferences in the past have focused on the scientific evidence for intelligent design and more broadly for a transcendent creator. But this time we thought we'd explore some of the important implications of that idea, especially for American history, especially in this 250th anniversary of the founding of our country, because it turns out that the idea of a creator, the conviction that there is a creator, was one of the foundational principles and convictions of our founders, and it made its way into our founding documents and the Declaration, and in a less explicit way in the Constitution itself.
And again, that's, I think, very important because, as you point out, there are some implications. Nancy Piercy has written about that, and we've had her on the program. One of your speakers there, Heather Zeiger, used to be at Probe Ministries, but is now doing some of the bioethics issues. We've talked with your colleague, John West, about this. And, of course, I think it was great to have the keynote from Ben Carson. I mean, he is just one of these genuinely nice people, and nevertheless, I think is somebody that will hopefully draw a lot of people in who might say, well, I'm not real interested in the science, but boy, we sure like Ben Carson, and he will be the individual speaking. Yeah.
Well, right. And this time, even though I typically speak on science, I used to teach political philosophy, and my talk will be about what I call the twin pillars of constitutional thought, the presuppositions that the founders had about human nature that influenced the way they constructed the Constitution. And those twin pillars are an absolute conviction in the intrinsic dignity of human beings as a consequence of having been endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights and having been made in the image of that Creator, and on the other hand, the recognition of the fallibility of man, or even the depravity of man. You could think of the two Ds as dignity and depravity, and they wanted to find a way to balance those things. They wanted to find a way to protect the intrinsic dignity of human beings, but also recognize that power can corrupt, and absolute power can corrupt absolutely. And so there needed to be checks and balances on power to protect the dignity of human beings against the depravity of other human beings as they acquired power in an unchecked way. And that was the fundamental idea behind Madison's initial draft of the Constitution. Yes, a great question.
Yes. Yeah. And I'll hold up our booklets on One Nation Under God, and on the Bill of Rights, and on the Federalist Papers, because I don't think you can read, for example, Federalist Paper number 10, Federalist Paper number 51, written by James Madison, without understanding that he had a biblical view of human depravity, of human sinfulness, studied under John Witherspoon at what at that time was called the College of New Jersey, now known as Princeton University. And those ideas are very important.
Yeah, and Kerby, I remember years ago, before I got my start writing, reading some of your columns, and I remember you had one in the national. Your column would go out syndicated, and there was one about the words that were added to the first draft of the Declaration. Jefferson wrote about the rights being grounded in nature's God, and the other members of the committee insisted on adding those words. The rights were grounded in nature. And the other members of the committee insisted on adding the words "and nature's God," that it was our status as being created in God's image that was the basis, the ultimate basis of that intrinsic dignity, and therefore the inalienable rights that the founders wanted to protect.
Well, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll spend just a few more minutes with Dr. Stephen Meyer. But again, you might say, okay, how do I find this information? Of course, you can go to discovery.org, but we have a direct link to discovery.org and then /Dallas. Of course, we have all the details that you have there. You're going to hear from a number of speakers, and we'll be talking about that when we come back from the break, because some will get into issues of intelligent design. Wesley Smith will be talking about this idea of rights of nature and some of the war on human beings. Titus Kennedy is somebody I wanted to get on. Of course, we're going to be doing quite a number of interviews over the next couple of weeks, because everybody seems to be coming out at about the same time with books on the subject of archaeology. So we'll certainly get into that. Nancy Piercy, of course, talking about the whole issue of the image of God. Casey Luskin has been on with us before, talking about some of the arguments for human uniqueness, as well as John West talking about scientific racism, Heather Zeiger talking about ethics and bioethics in the human person. So this is a conference I think you will want to actually attend or to watch. And the good news is, if you say, well, I'm not going to make it to Dallas by this Saturday, but I would like to watch the conference, click on that button that says register, and then you can begin to see all of the opportunities, because you can actually have just a single opportunity to watch it, or you could have an opportunity to gather together a group of individuals for a small watch party, a medium watch party, even a large watch party. There's even one for a jumbo watch party. And so maybe you get together some other individuals or have it at your church. Want you to know about it a week ahead of time, and we'll come back and continue our conversation with Stephen Meyer right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Jerry Newcomb recently wrote that there is no sanctuary in the sanctuary. He was describing what took place in Minnesota, which is a sanctuary state. But the members of City's Church in St. Paul discovered there was no sanctuary for those in the church sanctuary. Now, the scene inside the church was chaotic. Just glance at the affidavit filed on behalf of the victims of the anti-church protest. Agitators intimidated, harassed, and oppressed and terrorized the parishioners, including children. Now, the justification for this attack was ICE and immigration, but other church attacks over the years have been over such issues as abortion and homosexuality. Of course, we've also seen black churches attacked by racists and synagogues attacked by anti-Semites. At a recent hearing at the National Religious Liberty Commission, they heard testimony of another reason for a church attack: Israel. The Mission Church in California believes that Christians should support Jewish neighbors and the nation of Israel. The church hosted former Israeli Congress member, along with several Jewish guests and church members in attendance. Agitators posed as guests and infiltrated the sanctuary, yelling epithets until they were escorted out. More protesters lined up inches outside the door, calling church members Nazis and yelling, "Mission Church, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide." They showed up again on Easter last year and at an interfaith worship event. First Liberty Institute represents the church. Kelly Shackelford, who's the CEO, says that mobs don't get a veto over worship. We need to call on the Justice Department and local law enforcement to prosecute agitators. And we need to do more to protect our churches and congregations. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Please stay with us for a few more minutes. Dr. Stephen Meyer, again, an individual who is the head of the Discovery Institute Center for Science and Culture. And, of course, some of the other Discovery Institute individuals that we've interviewed before will be there as well. So just a great opportunity to hear from some of those individuals. And I might just mention, if you scroll near the bottom there, if you have other questions, I think they have a place where you can contact Pam Bailey and some others in terms of questions you might have about if you are wanting to come in and find a hotel or want to know where it's located in Dallas. All of that information is on the website, and we have a link there as well. But, Stephen, for just a minute, let's talk about the fact that Ben Carson is an individual that we've known of for years and just an outstanding individual, ran for the presidency. And, of course, we've had him speak for us in the past at the Point of View events, but it is a great opportunity and a great honor to really hear him. And as I understand it, he's going to be interviewed by John West. And so tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, Ben is, of course, an accomplished medical doctor, neurosurgeon, politician, and someone who can speak, I think, very poignantly to the whole idea of human dignity and how it applies to all people of all races and of all backgrounds. And that the founders were especially keen to protect the dignity of people who may have been marginalized or on the outside. And speaking as a black conservative, I think you'll have a unique perspective on that, because of course the issue of slavery took a long time to resolve in the country. But I think one of his great points is that the predicate for that, the foundational principles that enabled us to finally eradicate the blight of slavery were actually laid down in the Declaration, and that the abolitionists were calling us back to those principles and insisting that we apply them across all races and all creeds and all people. And so Ben speaks, I think, very poignantly to that, but also I think very hopefully about the future of the country. And I think he's very excited about this being the 250th anniversary year, and I think it's a chance for all of us to renew the vision of our founders and recommit ourselves to that. And he speaks, I think he will speak to that in a very powerful way.
Of course, kicking off is John West, and we interviewed him a while back on the Stockholm Syndrome Christianity. I got to love the fact that he's willing to name names and talk about some of the issues that need to be addressed. And then also another name that would only be a little bit familiar to our listeners. We've had Dr. Michael Egner on before, because we are convinced that one of the other real battles, and I've noticed this as I've gone to bookstores and noticed how many are saying, well, there's no evidence for a mind or a soul. We're just biological computers. So his book, The Immortal Mind, that he wrote with Denise O'Leary, I think is a very significant book, and I put that right up there with The Return of the God Hypothesis as some books that are so necessary to really fight some of the false ideas out there in the culture right now.
Absolutely. It's another plank in our challenge to scientific materialism. We've of course argued that the universe and life did not come about by undirected materialistic processes, but Dr. Egner is showing that there's powerful evidence that we ourselves are not strictly as one computer scientist, Marvin Minsky, once put it, computers made of meat. Instead, we have an immaterial mind and soul that for which there is evidence of immortality. That is to say, the immaterial part of us persists beyond the grave. There's also just powerful evidence now from neuroscience that the mind is controlling the brain, that the brain is an organ of thought that's controlled by an immaterial mind. This is a position in philosophy that's sometimes called mind-body dualism, that we aren't one thing, just matter. We're two things. We're a mind that controls the physical brain. And Dr. Egner gives a spectacularly clear and easy to understand talk on this in about 30 minutes. So he's tremendously good value. Someone else you mentioned that I think your listeners will be especially interested in hearing is Titus Kennedy.
Yes.
The young and very accomplished archaeologist now about to publish his fourth book on biblical archaeology. He has a book on biblical people that have been attested by biblical figures that have been attested by archaeological inscriptions, another book on biblical places, another book just on the archaeology about the life of Jesus called Excavating the Evidence for Jesus, and then yet a fourth book called Unearthing the Bible, 101 Artifacts that attest to the reliability, the historical reliability of the biblical text. So he'll be speaking, and we always have a track at the Science and Faith Conference on the relationship between archaeological findings and the historical reliability of the biblical witness. And Titus will be there again in force with a really great talk.
Well, again, just to show you how much evidence is coming in archaeology in the future, I know we're going to have Jeremiah Johnston. He's got a book coming out, which is The Discoveries of Jesus. Paul Weaver. There's another one, as well as, of course, I want to get Titus Kennedy on as well, which I think illustrates that in the biblical area, there is more evidence than ever before for the historical reliability of the Bible. And then in your area of intelligent design, there's more evidence scientifically for the idea of a supernatural creator. And this, in some respects, is why I've said that we find ourselves in kind of the golden age of apologetics and biblical evidence, don't you think?
It's absolutely true, Kerby. One of the scholars of the resurrection that you would know as Gary Habermas.
Sure.
He's recently said there's been more scholarship and scientific discovery in the last 25 years that has clear affirmative apologetic implications for the Christian faith than in the entire 2,000-year history of the church. And then he adds, but unfortunately, not enough people know about it. So one of the things we do at this conference is let people know about it, whether it's the evidence for the creation of the universe or the fine-tuning of the universe that points to a fine-tuner, or the digital code in DNA that points to a master programmer for life. In my area of study around the scientific evidence about cosmological and biological origins, or things in the area concerning the reliability of the biblical text. Just one little factoid that's just so extraordinary that there are 7 figures mentioned in the trial of Jesus of Nazareth who have all been independently attested by recent archaeological inscriptions within the last 60 years. Pilate, Caiaphas, Peter, Jesus himself, even Simon's a minor figure, Simon Cyrene, is now attested, and it just goes on. Annas, the father-in-law of the high priest Caiaphas. All these people are known to be real figures of history, to have lived in Judeo-Palestine at the time of the trial of Jesus. They were participants in the trial, and so it turns out that the trial of Jesus, which took place in a remote province of the Roman world, is one of the best attested events of all of human history. And you can go right across the swath of different periods of biblical history and find this same pattern of increasing amounts of external corroborating evidence of the historical testimony of the biblical text. It's quite extraordinary, and there's nobody better on that than young Titus Kennedy, and he'll be at the conference.
Well, again, lots of great individuals that will be there. And if you would like to know more, you can go to discovery.org or just simply go to pointofview.net, because we do have a link to the Dallas conference, which is put on by Discovery Institute, February 28th. You can register for that, whether you want to be there in person or to watch it. I mentioned before, there are probably some questions you might have, and they have Pam Bailey there for general questions. It has both her email and her phone in case you have any questions about that. And so if nothing else, I encourage you to attend the conference or to watch it online, and I think it's going to be outstanding. And so, Stephen, I know you're just getting back from a trip, but it meant a lot that you would give us a few minutes here to talk about the conference.
Always delighted to talk, Kerby, and maybe we'll see each other in the Crush on Saturday.
I'll wave at you from the distance if we can, but anyway, looking forward to it. Let's, if we can, encourage all of you to go to the website. And as you go there, let me also mention we do have our action item, which we're going to get into a little bit more with our next guest, Kevin McCullough, the Support the Save Act. We've talked about that for some time. This is for election integrity. And if you have not taken the time to actually contact your two United States senators about, I know this is really radical, requiring an ID before you vote, then you might want to do so, and we've made it very easy for you to do so. We've given you a sample letter. You can modify it any way you would like, and then you can click on that button that says send, or you can print it out and mail it, or even click the button that says preview. So go to the website, pointofview.net. That middle column that says take action is for you to support the SAVE Act. But I know when we get talking with Kevin McCullough, one of his columns was about what's been going on in Minnesota, but the other one was one citizen, one vote, period. So I know we'll be talking about it again right after this.
Have you ever met a child you knew would do great things? They displayed remarkable imagination, understanding, and a zest for learning. Now imagine someone takes that child and instead of fostering their potential with a real education, they feed them nothing but lies. You know, that scenario isn't so far from reality. From a young age, Americans are fed a consistent stream of distorted facts, from the secular indoctrination they receive in many public schools, to the biases presented as fact in many colleges and universities, to the barrage of misinformation from the mainstream media and the lack of moral grounding in our society. It's not that Americans aren't capable of understanding the truth, it's that they aren't exposed to it enough. You can expose more Americans to the truth when you give to Point of View, where listeners receive facts, perspective, and biblical truth they don't get from society. As long as we have truth, we have hope. Give today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
If you've been listening to Point of View over the last week or two, you've heard the name many times, Kevin McCullough, because we talked about his piece, Own It, and that will get us to what is happening in Minnesota and the issue of sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. Also, we've been talking about his piece, One Citizen, One Vote, period, and that relates very much to our action item right now, where we're encouraging you to contact your two senators about Support the SAVE Act. And I think we've learned a little bit more about how the mayor of New York requires all sorts of ID before you could even shovel snow, but you don't really have to have an ID before you vote. So I thought it would be great to bring Kevin McCullough back. He is an individual that is with the Salem Radio Network, and not only is, of course, on Salem Media's AM broadcast, but also nationally syndicated, operates a media firm. And Kevin, welcome back to Point of View.
Kerby, it's been a really long time since I've been with you. I think it was my last book the last time we had a chance to talk. But I just want to tell your audience, as someone who was kind of coming up in the talk radio world when you were already well established, I've always respected and so appreciated the work that you've done. And it is a real honor to be back with you today.
Well, and I apologize we didn't get back to you earlier, but I think my producer now knows your phone number, and we talk about you all the time when you're not on, because as you can tell, we've already talked about your columns. Yeah,
that's why my ears itch so much.
Let's talk about Own It for a few minutes, because that is one of the articles we posted. We posted it the other day, but I reposted it because if you can even begin to get your head around the fact that now we are pulling a lot of the ICE agents out of Minnesota and out of Minneapolis in particular. So at this point, you would expect, well, maybe the governor, Tim Walz, the Minnesota governor, as well as the Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frey, might say, okay, maybe we could have done this differently. But instead, they demanded reimbursement from the federal government. This is one of those ones, Kevin, where we say sometimes around the table, you just cannot make this up. What about that?
The Somali community in Minneapolis has also gone public and demanded an additional number of hundreds of thousands of dollars in, quote, damages for the ICE extractions. And I just have to say, Kerby, at some point, someone has to stand up and be a real American here and say, no, this is an actual country. We have actual sovereignty. There are actual laws that need to be followed. And the point that the governor and the mayor were always kind of failing in was that the ICE agents in the Border Patrol would not have been necessary if they had just simply given the okay for local law enforcement to cooperate with the feds as they did the necessary extractions of the illegal criminal aliens that were involved in the activities that they were rounding them up for. And we're not talking about grannies that overstayed visas or that had been here, minding their business, not doing anything else wrong besides being in the country illegally. What we're talking about are people who had committed felonies, sexual assault, rape, murder, kidnapping, the kinds of things that generally we even look down on fellow Americans doing from time to time. And yet, if they're in the country illegally doing them, we kind of think that's especially avoidable because they should have never been there to begin with. Had they only allowed the Minneapolis PD, the Minnesota State Police to join the effort and just control the crowds in the places where they were going, you never would have had the two shootings. You never would have had a lot of the problems that came about. And so for them to say now to the federal government, you owe us reparations for the damage caused during this time, it's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous.
One of the things that I think needs to be pointed out, of course you mentioned that as well, is that here when they chose resistance over responsibility, violence erupted, lives were lost, communities were traumatized, businesses suffered, on and on and on. But this did not happen in other states. Yes, you could see some of this in maybe Los Angeles or Portland, but in almost every other part of the country where there were ICE agents, no problem. And it illustrates again the kind of leadership choice that was made by both the governor and the mayor, doesn't it?
No question about it. You look at Texas, and they have rounded up, I think it's something like 5 times the amount of illegals that they did in Minnesota, and without a single incident of problematic worry. Like, it's amazing when the local law enforcement cooperates with the federal law enforcement, which, by the way, Kerby, they desire to do internally anyway. There's a brotherhood between law enforcement organizations across this country. I've been all over the a police officer in LA, you have deep respect for the police officers in New York. This East Coast, West Coast, vitriol. It's a misnomer to say that they would have had any issue working together. In every state where they have, you've had mostly very peaceful, very organized, very orderly operations. The mayor and the governor in Minnesota decided to create havoc, and when they did not like the blowback that they got. And as a result, they eventually had to come to the table and say, no, we need your help. And once Tom Homan got in there and got everybody to kind of get on the same page together, and now that the local law enforcement are working with the feds, we don't need as many federal people there. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah, they're not even hearing about it anymore. And again, love what you say there. Cooperation is not surrender. Cooperation is leadership. And that, I think, is a very good piece. And we've posted it for people to read because that was one of the articles that we spent some time talking about. But I would love to get your thoughts about the fact that right now we're encouraging our listeners, and we have the Take Action item on our website, pointofview.net, where you can contact your 2 United States senators. We give you a suggested letter that you might want to send out there. But again, I love the title, One Citizen, One Vote, period. And you said there's a time sometimes in American history when common sense finally breaks through the fog. And certainly that is the case. I cannot, and we've had conversations around this roundtable. We do a Friday roundtable, and you've had almost everybody that's ever been on the Friday roundtable say, this is an 80-20, maybe even a 90-10 issue. I can't understand why Democratic leaders want to die on this hill, but nevertheless, they are fighting against requiring the kind of photo ID you and I need to use every single day.
Well, actually, Kerby, I think that's a little disingenuous. You know exactly why the leaders are fighting against it,
yes,
even when the citizens are fighting for it. And it's very simple. 2020 was not it was not our imagination. It was stolen. There is funny business in the elections across the country in every state, and in the states where there is no voter ID required, you have more funny business than in the states where voter ID is required. It's not a mystery. It's not something that's unknown. It's not hard to figure out. This is very simple. It's like Walmart speak instead of Neiman Marcus speak. This is very plain. Every person on the street understands. If I have to account for who I am, therefore be a citizen, therefore be able to prove that I'm a citizen, then I get to vote. And if I'm not, then I shouldn't be allowed to vote. And at the end of the day, if we only have citizens voting, one party in particular is not going to have the success at the ballot box that they have had in recent years. And I don't think it's a mystery to anybody except perhaps the disingenuous claims of Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and others that are still trotting out this 0.0. I know we've won this issue, Kerby, when I turn on the 5 at night and I see Tyrus sitting in for Greg Gutfeld and I see Richard Fowler sitting in for Jess Tarlov, and Richard Fowler starts down the road of, oh, well, you're just going to disenfranchise black people. And Tyrus, who's 3 times the size of Richard Fowler, says to him, wait a minute, are you saying I'm too stupid to get an ID? Why are you telling me that I can't do that? What do you have, black man to black man, what do you have against people of color being responsible for their choices? When I see that discussion happening, I know that this is a winning issue for Americans, regardless of your party stripe, to just demand excellence and purity in our elections. And there's no reason why we shouldn't. When it's an 83% positive for Democrats, when it's an 86 positive for independents, when it's an 87% positive for Republicans, just do it. And you've passed it in the House. The Senate shouldn't be a problem. If it is, maybe we should consider busting the filibuster for this. That's John Thune's problem, not mine. But at the end of the day, this is not something that the American people are going to be against. They are for it in overwhelming percentages.
We're going to take a break, come back and talk a little bit more about that. But again, you even point out all sorts of legitimate democracies do. France does, Germany does, Canada does, Japan does, Mexico does, India does. And again, if you wanted some of the documentation for that, it is all in this very good piece by Kevin McCullough, One Citizen, One Vote, period. I'll come back just real quickly because we have been spending some time talking about Zohran Mamdani in terms of how much money he wants to spend up there. But more importantly, he's really asking some people to come out and to actually shovel snow, which has been very necessary there. But I thought for just a minute, and we've posted this article, what it requires from you before you can even begin to throw snow off to the side of the road. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Kevin McCullough with us for a few more minutes. I might just mention we do have a link to That Kevin Show. It's on SoundCloud.com, but you don't have to remember all that because that's a link right under his picture. Obliterating confusion, amplifying truth, pursuing clarity, binge thinking at the speed of sound. And I thought for just a minute we might talk about New York City. Of course, you have a mayor there, but I thought it was interesting, as some people have pointed out, and I posted a column in which, of course, the mayor has said we need some emergency snow shovelers, which is okay. I think that's always good. But for the paperwork, you first of all have to bring a snow shovel for $2 more than the state's minimum wage during what is suggested to be perhaps the largest storm in the decade. But in order to be a snow shoveler, Kevin, 2 passport photos, 2 original forms of ID, don't forget copies, and a Social Security card. Howsoever, if you want to vote, well, we don't need anything. And even to register a vote, all you need to come up with is the last 4 digits of your Social Security card. So it seems to me that we are requiring IDs for almost everything, including shoveling snow, but we're not requiring an ID to go vote.
Oh, you have no idea how corrupt that is, and I'll get to that in just a second. I do want to say personally, again, thank you for you and your ministry for such a long time. And it's cool when things like this happen, because I just found out last week that my affiliate team just added us to WPEO in Peoria, which covers all of South Illinois and Central Illinois. And you're my lead-in to my show. So
yes.
people that listen to Kerby, they just get to stay with Kevin right after that. So thank you for your faithfulness and your consistency all these years. Yeah, so here's the thing in New York. First of all, I'm a big cheerleader for my city. I think it's the greatest city on the planet. You might not want to come in the next 3.5 years because I don't think things are going to be very well organized.
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful that we can get things straightened out after that. But yes, you are right. You have to have 2 forms of ID that are legit, and you have to have a Social Security number to come shovel snow to get paid a minimum to get paid a little bit of a wage.
Yes.
And this is the best part of all of it. In place of a sanitation department that's already budgeted to do the work that he's going to pay you to do. Now, I don't know how many companies do very well when they hire 2 people to do the same job twice, but I'm going to guess that most people think that's redundancy. And
I guess maybe you've lost you. Oh, there you
go. Shovel.
Yeah.
No, I'm here.
Yep. We just lost some of your audio, but again, I think the redundancy question is a good one. Why do we need to do the same job twice?
Well, and if the taxpayers are already paying the sanitation department to do that, and it was Ed Koch, the very flamboyant mayor of New York from years gone by, that said once, more mayors have lost their job in New York City because of the performance of the sanitation department than any other aspect of the job while they were mayor.
Yes.
All you have to do is not be willing to shovel snow, and people will unelect you. But the fact that he requires these 2 pieces of ID, and he got absolutely scolded for it across social media, and he doesn't even realize the inconsistency, because he came out boldly and said that he was not going to support the SAVE Act in any way at all.
It's amazing. Well, since we're talking about the mayor for just a minute, we did talk about this on Friday, but it's worth mentioning again that the budget that the mayor has put together, and he calls it austere, is $10 billion larger than the budget for the entire state of Florida, where we broadcast. And yet the population there in New York City is 40% of the Sunshine State. So he's saying, look, the only way we're going to be able to deal with this budget is either I have to raise the property taxes and thus affect all sorts of middle-income people, or the Democrats up there in Albany, New York, need to pass a very significant and maybe even draconian wealth tax so that we can even come close to balancing the budget. And when the budget for the city of New York is larger than the entire state of Florida, and he wants to do more all the time, I think we've got some problems, don't we?
No, there's no question about that. And he's losing the base that would be able to fund that. Let me give you an example. My good friend John Catsimatidis, who owns 2 grocery chains in the city, Gristedes and D'Agostino's, they actually competed against each other, but he bought out the one, and now he runs both of them. But he is a lifelong New Yorker, came here as a Greek immigrant as a kid, worked his way up, became a billionaire, one of the richest men in America.
Yes.
I've asked him many times, John, do you ever think things in New York will get so bad that you'll ever leave? And he's told me over the years, never, 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 never. I don't care who's the mayor. I'm never going to leave. He's considering moving his operations to New Jersey, and he and his wife moving to Florida, where he has a secondary house. It is not, if you run the John Catsimatidis out of New York City, you will not have it. You cannot tax your way out of overspending. And this is the problem with Marxists and socialists that just believe that there's just an infinite amount of everybody else's money. They don't understand, because they can't balance their own checkbook, that they also can't balance anybody else's checkbook. And at the end of the day, if you are out of cash, you are out of cash. This is the worst possible thing for New York City. It might be the best thing ever for Marxism in America, because we're going to get a really clear picture of just how bad it is. But I'm very saddened about the number of people that will experience tremendous pain over the next few years because of these stupid ideas.
The old Margaret Thatcher comment, a problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money, or the one I always use, if you think it's expensive to live in the city right now, just imagine how expensive it's going to be when everything's free. And yet, of course, that is the problem, and we've seen that with the exodus of millionaires and billionaires from California, and we will see it in New York City. But just before I let you go, I do have a link to That Kevin Show, and again, I would encourage some of our other radio stations to carry you as well as Point of View. But even if people can't hear you, I wanted them to be able to hear some of the various interviews that you've done. And so we have a link to that at SoundCloud. And of course, we also have posted at least 2 of your commentaries that we've talked about. And so as you can see, we talk about you when you're not around, but maybe we need to turn that around and bring you around every once in a while, especially since you and I are both going to be on WPEO in Peoria, Illinois. So I'm looking forward to anything we can do to help promote you there as well. So thank you so very much for being with us, and I look forward to the next opportunity.
Appreciate it, Kerby. Thank you for your faithfulness.
We are going to take a break, and as you have heard us mention, there is an opportunity for you to contact your 2 United States senators, and that is our action item for this week. We have posted it before. Many of you may have already done so, but if you have not, here's how you do. You go to the website, pointofview.net, scroll down to the middle, you'll see a section that says Support the SAVE Act. You might say, okay, what's the SAVE Act? SAVE stands for Safeguarding American Voter Eligibility Act. It would make voter ID requirements essential for all the states, and as a result, we point out the very high percentages of individuals who believe that this is a very worthwhile piece of legislation. It has passed the House. It's sitting in the Senate. It is time for the Senate to act. We give you a 3-paragraph letter as a suggestion, but you can change it any way you would like to do so. Then you go down and click the button Send, and you have done your civic duty. Some of you like to print it out. Well, you can do that too, and then mail it. Either way, we would encourage you to take action on this very important issue. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Chris Harper with us. We have never had him on before, but his ministry, Better Man Ministry, actually is just one of many there, and I'd heard about it a while back, and I thought it would be good for you to learn more about what we can do to emphasize biblical manhood. Then we'll get back to some issues in the news, some follow-up comments about the Olympics. All that coming up right after this.
Many years ago, they began saying that we live in the information age. Well, today there is so much information coming at us from every direction. The hardest thing is to discern which issues are really important and how can I make a positive impact without wasting my time trying to figure out accurate information. Let me give you a suggestion to help with that. Visit pointofview.net, look at the tabs across the top, find the one named Viewpoints. Kerby Anderson and others on our team are constantly watching for news to identify those issues that you really need to know about. They boil things down in a brief summary, and then you can decide if it's something on which you want to learn more and get involved. Again, when you go to pointofview.net, click on Viewpoints, you'll see exactly what I mean. You'll see the issues that we are covering right now. And when you like what you see, I honestly think you will, you can slide on over, enter your email, and get them automatically sent to your inbox each day. That's it. Take a minute now, be informed. Pointofview.net, click on Viewpoints. Point of View will continue after this. Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, we're going to spend some time in the first half hour really talking about ministry to men. And certainly we've talked about that many times before. I've spoken to various men's groups. We've had all sorts of people on this program, from Promise Keepers, others talking about how to really minister to men. I think you're going to really appreciate learning more about the Better Man Ministry. A good friend of this ministry told me about that, and I have just been delighted that we were able to bring in studio today, even though I had to drive a little bit of distance, Dr. Chris Harper. He is an individual who is actually identified as not only a board member, but the chief storyteller. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Has his master's degree from Dallas Theological Seminary, has his doctorate from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, lives actually in Arlington, Texas, and is an individual that I am just getting to meet for the first time, and you're getting to meet for the first time. So, Dr. Chris Harper, thank you for being here today.
Well, Kerby, it's an honor and a pleasure, and certainly excited to be with you.
We have a link to betterman.com. I would encourage many of you that are involved in any kind of men's ministry or would like to develop one, or you're just a man saying, I really want to understand what biblical manhood is all about. This is why we have that link. So you can go to the picture of Chris Harper, scroll down, you'll go to betterman.com, and you can find it. One of the founding members, Robert Lewis.
Yeah.
That goes all the way back to all the work that he did there in Arkansas. Mm-hmm. And I've got lots of fun stories about Robert Lewis, but one, when they were doing the thing about biblical manhood, somebody gave him a sword, this huge sword, but we were at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, and I looked at Robert and I said, how are you going to get this on the airplane? But nevertheless, it's a good illustration of the fact that we've really been talking for some time about how we really need to encourage men to really begin to engage what the Bible has to say about manhood. And that's really what you're doing every single day as one of the chief speakers.
Absolutely. Robert told me something years ago that is stuck. You can't become what you can't define. Mm-hmm. I would actually take it a step further and say when a thing isn't rightly understood, the abuse of that thing is inevitable.
Yes.
And whether that's marriage, whether that's the family, the purpose and function of the church, whatever it is, if there's not a proper understanding, the abuse of or by is inevitable. And we've been seeing that with manhood and masculinity now for decades.
Well, we're getting all the false cultural messages because some of the messages are, well, you just have to go it alone because most of the action heroes are simply on their own. But I always jokingly say even the Lone Ranger had Tonto. But nevertheless, sometimes they go it alone, and so they don't develop the relationships they need to. Then they're hearing, and we talked about this earlier, even today, Nancy Pearcey talked about this issue of toxic manhood that has been attacking men. And so after a while, men are just saying, what am I supposed to be? I'm supposed to be like Jesus, but I don't get a lot of teaching sometimes from the pulpit, although I think that's changing because of some of the work that you and others are doing. But I just don't really know what it means to be a man. And if I can't properly identify it, I'm going to really abuse it, aren't I?
That's right. They'll typically do one of three things. They'll either guess at what it means.
Yes.
And we're terrible at guessing at things. As men, 9 out of 10 times we're going to guess wrong. Or, to your point, they'll listen to the loudest voice in culture. Or 3, which is most disheartening, they'll slow quit and just resign. the entire mantle of manhood. And I see this all the time, 26, 28-year-old men. I often say that men die when they're 78, but they're buried, or they're buried when they're 78, but they die at 28.
Yes.
And they've just kind of given up on life. And to paint a proper target, to paint a picture, is to speak life back into it.
Oh, again, I just think very highly of the organization. So first of all, it's betterman.com. And first of all, you want to give men something more, something better. And you point out the fact that we live in a time when no common definition or vision for manhood exists. And so really what you are trying to do is develop that. So help us out with the definition, because if we don't get that right, everything else is going to fail from that point on.
Yeah, amen. And fortunately, we don't have to reconstruct it or redefine it. We just have to look to the greatest man ever, which was King Jesus.
Yes.
And what we learned from him is what I call the joyful pursuit of sacrificial responsibility. The Bible says that for the cross was set before Jesus. For the joy before him, he endured the cross. Right? So as a man, I'm called to joyfully pursue sacrificial responsibility. And it manifests itself in what we call the 4 W's. A real man courageously follows God's word. Mm-hmm. A real man loves and protects God's woman. A real man excels at the work God gives him. And a real man betters God's world through his children, church, and community.
And I think some people are going to be surprised when they go to the website to see you have representatives all over the country. Yeah. And so it doesn't matter where we broadcast, there is at least one regional ambassador, if not more, which are already trying to help those individuals. Yeah. Many of the people that are on your board or some of your speakers are people we've had on this program. This is the first time I've met you, but I mentioned just off air some of the people as I go through the list that I know and we've interviewed over those years. But it does seem to me that there is a real hunger for that. One of the particular networks that we broadcast from is in Augusta, Georgia. And when we were actually waiting to go to the network facility, we went into this, I think it was a Panera Bread, and I look over, and there is an older man discipling a younger man with Gene Getz's book, Measure of a Man. And, of course, we've had Gene Getz on this program many times before, and I thought, isn't that encouraging to see that something I heard about, and this is now decades ago, because I'm pretty old. I'm older than you. That's old. To see that still being passed on. And really, if you're going to take seriously God's word, it talks about the fact that older men really need to disciple or mentor younger men, right? Yeah. Titus 2. Yeah. And that's what you're all about.
It's beautiful. And I actually call it interpretation. So I call older saints interpreters.
Yes.
So I'm living in a story right now, and it's beautiful when an older man can come and help me interpret the story I'm living in. And Better Man is we really focus on that intergenerational discipleship. One of the ways we're different today, a lot of the men's ministries in the 80s and 90s, the number one enemy per se was passivity.
Right.
We had a generation of men, we needed to call them out and call them up to something more. Well, fast forward 30 years, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, we're not really passive. We actually are very motivated. I'm an older millennial. Today, the greatest enemy is ignorance. We just don't know what we don't know.
That's right.
Most of us grew up without a guide. We grew up without an interpreter. So again, we're just out here listening to culture or guessing or doing whatever, and we're making a mess of it.
I want to pull you in one of these times when we do our Next Generation Roundtable. It used to be called the Millennial Roundtable. Now we call it Next Generation because we have millennials, Gen Y, and Gen Z. Of course, you mentioned Gen Alpha. And I think your particular perspective would be very helpful in that regard. But when we come back from the break, I want to talk about some of the things that you do to actually encourage men, and how, if you're wanting to start a men's ministry at your church, or you're in a man's group and you'd like to connect up, or maybe you're just out there by yourself, or quite frankly, some of the individuals listening are the sisters or wives saying, I need to get him involved in something. I want to talk about how people can plug into that. As we go to a break, this is the perfect time to go to betterman.com. We, of course, have the link. We also have a picture of Chris Harper there, Dr. Chris Harper, if you'd like to know more about him and have him come speak. All of that available on our website, pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Jerry Newcomb recently wrote that there's no sanctuary in the sanctuary. He was describing what took place in Minnesota, which is a sanctuary state. But the members of City's Church in St. Paul discovered there was no sanctuary for those in the church sanctuary. Now, the scene inside the church was chaotic. Just glance at the affidavit filed on behalf of the victims of the anti-church protest. Agitators intimidated, harassed, and oppressed and terrorized the parishioners, including children. Now, the justification for this attack was ICE and immigration, but other church attacks over the years have been over such issues as abortion and homosexuality. Of course, we've also seen black churches attacked by racists and synagogues attacked by anti-Semites. At a recent hearing at the National Religious Liberty Commission, they heard testimony of another reason for a church attack: Israel. The Mission Church in California believes that Christians should support Jewish neighbors and the nation of Israel. The church hosted former Israeli Congress member, along with several Jewish guests and church members in attendance. Agitators posed as guests and infiltrated the sanctuary, yelling epithets until they were escorted out. More protesters lined up inches outside the door, calling church members Nazis and yelling, "Mission Church, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide." They showed up again on Easter last year and at an interfaith worship event. First Liberty Institute represents the church. Kelly Shackelford, who's the CEO, says that mobs don't get a veto over worship. We need to call on the Justice Department and local law enforcement to prosecute agitators. And we need to do more to protect our churches and congregations. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Dr. Chris Harper in studio with us today, and if you would like to join the conversation, let me open up the phones, 1-800-351-1212, or if not, just sit back and take some notes, because we're going to be talking about betterman.com, biblically rich, theologically sound, and incredibly practical material from the Better Man Ministry. This may be the first time you've heard about that. Clarity, community, and transformation. Yeah. Some great resources, and also we have, if you would like to contact Chris Harper. You know, you're going to be speaking at the University of Missouri, right, next week? So
next week.
Some of you that are around the country might actually have a chance to hear him speak. But I might just mention that if you'd want to contact him, we have his social media, and we have the link to betterman.com, but we also have a link to the X file as well as the Facebook files and also other great resources. But if people say, okay, I'm kind of interested, what would it entail to maybe join with your ministry? How do people do so?
Absolutely. So the majority of our activity comes through the local church. So, Kerby, think about this. There's 350,000, give or take a few, churches in North America. 80% have a functioning ministry to women. Less than 10% have a functioning ministry to men.
There you go. Yeah.
So what we've done is created a 2-year turnkey solution for that basically we can catalyze and kickstart any men's ministry in the country. And we've made it frictionless. We wanted to remove all barriers. So it's video and content driven. You can access the video and content at betterman.com. And through the generosity of others, it's actually a free resource to the local church.
Yes. Well, again, I just encourage people to go to your website. Yep. Again, we've got that, betterman.com, and find out a little bit more. And let's talk about that for just a minute, because I was doing a video yesterday, which had nothing to do with Point of View, but it was a video for a local church. And I was talking about the fact that the women's ministries always thrive. They develop these, what I call steel magnolia connections. Yeah. And women talk to other women. And I have hardly ever been in a church that hasn't had a dynamic women's ministry. Yeah. I've been to lots of churches that don't have a men's ministry, and part of that is we don't know how to reach out to each other. I mentioned just a minute ago being in Augusta, Georgia, where there's a network there, the Good News Network. I was also, we talked about this earlier in the last hour, WPEO, I was in Peoria, and they had me speak to a men's group, and I talked about biblical friendships based on David and Jonathan. Wonderful. You know, and that whole wonderful principle. But that's been a problem, Chris, because we have published books. I have done interviews on the friendless American male. We've talked about the crisis of loneliness. I got some of these booklets that we produce all the time. And it does seem to me that men need something to bring them together. Maybe it's going to a sporting event. Maybe it's repairing cars. Maybe it's doing woodwork. It's something to get men together. And I know of so many churches that say we'd like to have a dynamic men's ministry like we have a women's ministry, but we haven't found the key. Maybe you could provide the key.
Yeah. So I think there's two things in that. Women are naturally relational,
right?
Naturally social. There was this kind of theory that discipleship and ministry should happen organically. Unfortunately, put a bunch of men organically together, and they'll never get past talking about the football game from last night or the weather. We don't really go deep organically, so it has to be intentional.
Yes.
What I often share with churches is you've got to show men where they're going. You have to paint a target. You have to be clear about the journey they're about to go on.
Good point.
And if you bring clarity, they'll typically stick around for the journey. And you see this historically with military campaigns and things of that nature. Like, we know the enemy, or we know the target. We know how we're going to get there, and now it's time to execute. Same thing with men's ministry. Paint the target, show them where they're going, and then encourage them along the way. I think that's first. Second, and you mentioned this at the top of the show, we've got to bring back intergenerational discipleship.
Yes.
We've aged and staged everyone.
Unfortunately.
We have. And you can't separate 20-year-olds from 60-year-olds and expect the 20-year-olds just to bloom in wisdom. That's not how wisdom gets passed down. That's not how wisdom happens. Wisdom comes through experience. And knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. Knowledge without experience will always lead to arrogance.
Yeah.
It's the knowledge that puffs up. So when you can take that knowledge, that zeal and that passion of a younger man, and put him with the experience and wisdom of an older man, Acts 2:17 says the Lord will pour his Spirit out on that, and something beautiful happens. If we can do those two things, we'll see a resurgence of men's ministry across the country.
We are seeing right now that Gen Z men are more interested in church than Gen Z women, which illustrates another point, and that is the idea of discipleship and mentorship. Again, the video I was doing yesterday, which had nothing to do with point of view, but now actually has a lot to do with our conversation, was about the fact that in this particular church, the chairman of the elder board one time when I was meeting said, I really don't know that I have anything to share with these younger guys. And I looked at him and said, well, if you don't, we're in a lot of trouble because you have a lot of wisdom. And he was being humble. But the point I made, and the point I want to make right now, is we have a lot of young men that would love to be mentored. We're having difficulty finding older men to be those mentors. Right. And so it seems to me that that's another thing that Better Man Ministry can accomplish.
Absolutely. And that goes back to that Acts 2:17 principle. To be successful as an older man in the church today, basically you had to show up, tithe, and help park cars, and we'll make you a deacon.
Yes.
and nothing wrong with those things. Those things are valuable, but there's a lot more to it than that. And so when you help an older saint see, hey, you've got a lot to offer, even it's not so much your victories, it's even your setbacks and your losses. I learn more from someone else's losses than I do their wins.
Yes, you do.
And the idea that, hey, maybe I've messed up 2 or 3 times, by following me, I can help you mess up less.
Yeah.
I'm all for that.
That's all good.
And we have to encourage men in that vein.
Yes. So let's, if we can, just for a few minutes we have left, there's a place where it says launch a study. Some people are thinking, okay, what are we signing up for? You have video sessions, workbooks, you have discussion questions. This is plug and play, is it not? Talk us through what it would take if somebody says, well, I'd like to join with it, or my church would like to join with it. What does it mean when I sign up?
Absolutely. So what you would do is you would sign up, and by sign up, all we mean is putting in your contact information. Once you put in your contact information, it unlocks the media. So at that point, you get to make a choice. Do you want to use one of our nationally known teachers, or do you want to teach it live? There are some men, pastors, men's leaders that say, hey, we want to teach the content live. If you want to do that, We've got slides, we've got teaching notes, we've got illustrations, we've got everything built into it. So whether you're teaching it live or you're picking one of our, I tell leaders, pick your avatar, pick your character, right, to go on the journey with. After that, you're either going to get a physical copy of the workbook, or the majority of people just download the workbook right there online. After that, you get your group together. Groups are 7, 8, 10 men. They'll sit together. They'll watch the teaching. The teachings are about 30 minutes, and the real transformation then happens in the discussion afterwards. The questions are already formatted for you. You're really not even leading. You're more facilitating the discovery process. It's really facilitation. So you're gonna be at the table with hopefully younger men, and older men. There's gonna be variance, and what you're gonna do is facilitate the conversation, and then just let the Holy Spirit and the Word of God do what it does best.
Oh, it's so good. Again, if people have questions, and I know they do, I've opened up the phones, but I'll probably get the questions after you leave, which is always the case, because I don't want to ask any stupid question while we got somebody with a doctorate down here talking about this. But there are ways which people can contact you. And again, as you just pointed out, you're going to be in Missouri next week, so our listeners up there could already connect up with you, or you may be traveling around. And what I'd love to do is maybe do a future program on just men's ministry, and you could maybe have one of your speakers by phone, and you could be in studio. We could kind of really talk about all these various issues. But I use this today just to get people started to know there is a Better Man ministry, and to let them kind of learn some of that, maybe kick the tires, check it out a little bit, and then we'll see what we can do from there. So is that good?
Man, that would be a privilege and a pleasure to be with you on that, and just to continue to create awareness. Again, this is an age where information is readily accessible. What's not accessible is that experience. We're battling immaturity. You mentioned Nancy Piercy. She's a really good friend of mine, and Nancy and I agree. There are some people out there painting this as masculinity versus femininity. It's not the truth. Those are two separate categories to the glory of God. The opposite of biblical masculinity is immaturity. It's men who are still thinking and acting like boys, and that's what we're trying to cure.
Again, the Better Man Ministry, Dr. Chris Harper. And if you'd like to know more, we've given you all the links you need right there on the website, pointofview.net. Well, great to meet you, and we'll get together in the future to do it again.
It's a pleasure. See you then.
We'll be right back.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places. And some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you, now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give to Point of View today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please, take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give it 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, let me, if I can, just briefly talk about tomorrow. We're going to be spending some time talking about space, and the reason for that is multifold. First of all, the Artemis II, originally we thought it was going to be launched in March. Looks like it's moved back to April, but sometime we will actually launch a rocket to go to the moon again. or for those of you that believe we never went, for the first time. No, I'm just kidding. And that will be an issue, certainly, as well. You have the merger of two huge private space companies together. You have Elon Musk talking about wanting to put, if you can believe this, 1 million satellites in orbit. What will that mean? As well as even the possibility of cyber attacks from space and all sorts of things, as well as, of course, we will have Parker Ing with us, who is with Day 4, to really talk about how, in some respects, when we look to space and we look to the stars, the heavens do declare the glory of God. He has this wonderful ministry to encourage individuals to actually go out there and have a Star Watch party and to use that in an evangelistic way. So in addition to, of course, also promoting the Discovery Institute Dallas Conference on this Saturday, we also will be promoting an astronomy day that will be taking place at the Wonder Center in March. So we'll talk about some of that tomorrow. So that's the first part of that as well. But I would be remiss if we didn't spend just a little bit of time talking about the Olympics for a variety of different reasons. First of all, the article I've posted by Jeffrey Blahar, The Best of America on Ice. He says, I won't pretend that I've been much into the Olympics this year. He followed it more intently, he said, during his childhood, but he decided that he would get up Sunday morning to watch the Americans compete against the Canadians in the gold medal hockey game. By the way, he says, sorry, God, I'll see you next week. And what's so interesting is then he ties that into the fact that the first Olympic gold since the Miracle on Ice in 1980. Now, you might remember on Friday we had Jeff talk about a little bit about the fact that we were dealing with this wonderful victory of the American hockey team against the Russians in 1980. And I kind of said, Jeff, you got to understand, anybody who is like under the age of 60 doesn't anything. It's maybe a footnote in history. They didn't experience it. Truth be told, I was actually by myself at the time because my family had gone back. I was actually at Georgetown University at the time, and so I actually got to watch it just the way Jeffrey Blahar watched it just on Sunday. And so in some respects, very exciting because whether you're talking about the amateur athletes in 1980 playing against essentially the Russian professionals and beating them in 1980 in the so-called Miracle on Ice, that was pretty significant. But still, let's be honest, if there's one particular sport that Canada owns the rest of the world, but especially the United States, it is hockey. And, of course, you have this incredible overtime victory from an individual who then gives this incredible interview, bleeding from his nose, chipped tooth and the rest, saying he was proud to be an American. Now, let's recognize the other side of this, and that is 45 years ago, I would have to say that most every American was proud to be an American, and things have changed dramatically, as illustrated by the fact that in his piece here, he talks about one individual who is an Olympic skier who was born in California, attends Stanford University, lives in San Francisco, but is competing for was competing for the Chinese government in the Olympics. And what a contrast to another individual who we've talked about, who actually comes from, if you will, Chinese background, whose parents fled the post-Tiananmen Square massacre and all the rest, who actually won the gold medal and is so grateful. And so you have seen really all the kind of split that is there. This, I think, illustrates the kind of problem we have with certain kinds of, if you will, left-leaning Americans. I'll hold up this picture here for those of you watching online. It comes from the Huffington Post, in which they're showing all these Americans waving their flags in the closing ceremony. And the Huffington Post, and this again, I'll hold it up so you can see, I'm not making this up, in their X post said, if waving the American flag or chanting USA turns you off right now, you're not alone. As a matter of fact, underneath it says, there's a reason you feel yucky watching the Olympics right now. So again, even at a time when we can maybe be proud of American athletes and proud of the things that we certainly should be proud about in terms of America, the left can only focus on the things that we acknowledge. Certainly some very dark parts of American history. There have been dark chapters in American history. There's still more that we would want to do to make this country even better. But find me any place else where we have been able to provide such freedom. Just ask some of the athletes themselves who were able to compete, and they were certainly grateful for that. And I'll use one other illustration to just say that not only are the leftists upset about America, but they willingly will attack anybody that would actually show even a little bit of pride. And this one is also something that is posted, in this case, by Wes Moore. Governor Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, and it shows, if you've seen some of the memes, an American eagle attacking a Canadian goose. And the front part of it here is that this, as soon as it was posted by a Democratic governor, actually you had leftists who said, he's lost my vote because of this, because of being a little bit of proud about the fact that America beat the Canadians in hockey. If you think that sometimes we are making these stories up about the almost irrationality of some of the left-leaning Americans, that illustrates the point only so well. So I thought, if nothing else, this piece that we posted by Jeffrey Blahar, who reminds us that there is a lot of good to certainly remind us of that. And he talks about that the first Olympic gold for the U.S. men's hockey since the Miracle on Ice in 1980 was one that took place in Lake Placid. I've actually been in the Lake Placid arena just to see what that looked like. We had, of course, the Cold War overtones. In many cases, it was almost like a grudge match. And yet here you had an individual that was able to prevent that. And so we are starting to see more and more individuals that, on the one hand, are excited about what America has done and excited what American athletes have done, and others that say, if you actually say anything positive about America or even about the victory of the U.S. hockey team over Canada, you're going to lose my vote. And, of course, also one other element that Jeffrey Blahar talks about is the story, which is really incredible, where they grabbed the departed. If you're not familiar, these brothers were killed by a drunk driver 2 years ago. They grabbed the jersey of this individual and held it aloft and then brought the children over. There were just all sorts of great positive things that you will see there. And again, the interview with Jack Hughes, if you haven't seen it, blood coming out of his nose, a chipped tooth, which I hope he gets fixed. And what does he say? I love the USA. The U.S. Hockey Brotherhood is so strong, and we're so proud to win for our country. Do you love that? I mean, it just is the kind of thing that you would hope we would say more of. And yet, as I've pointed out, when we talked about the bicentennial in 1976, great pride, great patriotism. Now, America at 250 years, some people are patriotic, some people are proud, but others are not. And I think that's just an illustration of the need for us to bring us back to some of these foundational principles of America. One of the reasons why I'll hold up my booklets again on One Nation Under God, the Bill of Rights, the Federalist Papers. We have some others coming out that if you are already a Truth Team member, you're going to have one on a biblical point of view on the Declaration of Independence, a biblical point of view on America's founding. We need to come back to some of these first principles. And so, again, we hope that you will join with us in this 250th anniversary of the nation. And, of course, if you go to our website right now, You will see 250 years restoring America's godly heritage, and I thought it would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about some of the pride at least some Americans are having after a very interesting set of Winter Olympics. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, let me just mention that while we can be proud to be Americans and proud to live in America, even though there is more work to do, as there always will be, given the fact that we are in a fallen world and we have sinful individuals, be grateful that you live in the United States and not in Mexico right now, because I would be also remiss if I did not mention the fact that the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, actually has taken some very significant and decisive action trying to get rid of and decapitate the Jalisco New Generation cartel. What she was able to do is actually kill off one of these drug cartel bosses, El Mencho, Nemesio Osinguera Cervantes. And as soon as she was able to eliminate him, what you have now in Mexico are murders, all sorts of burning cars, highway blockades. Some of the bank branches have been set ablaze on otherwise empty streets. There are tourists right now that are stranded in resorts, for example, in Puerto Vallarta. Classes have been suspended in 13 of the states of Mexico, all because of the killing of El Mencho, who, of course, is one of the leading bosses of one of the major cartels, which has led to a spasm of revenge against the government, and just an illustration again of how significant the drug cartels are. Once again, one of the reasons why we wanted to control the border was to not only prevent illegal immigrants coming here, and also to prevent the amount of fentanyl and other drugs coming across the border, but the other was to prevent the opportunity, which the drug cartels were starting to take advantage of being able to control the border and be able to maybe even have incursions into this country. And when you realize that in some respects the Mexican government is outgunned and outfinanced by these drug cartels, you can see the incredible challenge that she faces and the kind of backlash that is taking place. So I did not want the program to go any further without spending just a few minutes mentioning what is happening in Mexico. Probably we'll get into it in more detail tomorrow in our second hour, but did want to mention that real quickly. Real quickly also, we did on Friday talk about the fact that the Supreme Court did rule that the IEEPA, that stands for the International Emergency Economics Act, tariffs are unconstitutional. Not a real surprise, but almost immediately, then President Trump said, well, we'll try something else, and that is to use what are called the Section 122 tariffs. Okay, that is a possibility, but it, I think, illustrates again that even though there's an attempt to try to raise, and I think the raising of the tariffs is up to, I think, about 10%, although Scott Bessent, who's the Treasury Secretary, said maybe it would have to be 15%. This is all part of the Section 122, also the section of the investigations. There's a whole lot of technical details, but first of all, I don't think those were going to stand constitutional scrutiny. And of course, it's sort of a moot point because even though those would be implemented quickly, I think they would not be continued unless you had congressional approval, so they may phase out in about 30 days. One of the things we've never really talked about on this program is why is it that the president is bringing the tariffs? Well, if you've listened to him even before he was a presidential candidate, he's always argued that these countries are ripping us off, and some are. Certainly China fits into that category. But there is a bigger issue, and it's certainly an illustration as to why many people in his cabinet go along with him, including, I just mentioned Scott Bessent, your Commerce Secretary, and many of the others. And maybe the way to illustrate that is this. Imagine that you were trying to get a loan from your bank, and imagine that you only have one source of income, and it's not great, and you have quite a bit of debt, and the bank is trying to decide whether or not they would lend you more money, given the fact you have some debts and you need more money. But they would probably be looking at you more favorably if not only you had a source of income, but you had a side hustle. Or if you're a man, you have an income and your wife had an income. Or if you're a woman, your husband had an income and you had an income. They'd say, okay, that you're a better credit risk. That's exactly where the United States is right now. What does Scott Bessent have to do as a Treasury Secretary? He has to sell bonds. He has to sell treasuries. He's got to encourage people, not only in this country but around the world, that investing in the debt that the United States has is a worthwhile investment. Well, one of the ways to make it look more attractive is to not only have income coming in from taxes, but also have income coming in through tariffs. As a result, we actually probably will have less of a deficit over the last few months because of income that's come in through the tariffs. So once you understand that, you can see that it makes it more likely that people will buy our treasuries, buy our debt. And when you are a federal government that's $38 trillion in debt, you can begin to see the problem. Tomorrow, I'm going to go into more of the issues related to the fact that this whole world order that we have right now is starting to break down. And in some respects, one of the ways President Trump and Secretary Bessent are trying to address that issue, given the fact that we have global bond holders, is to actually find a way to make it more attractive for people to invest in this government. So that's one of the reasons, one of the other reasons for the tariffs. And so I just wanted you to know that, again, we were going to see tariffs, the president using a different law to begin to push that out. But I think we need to get into a more significant discussion of that, and we will postpone that till tomorrow afternoon. But just before we run out of time, let me once again mention that we think it is important for you to contact your 2 United States senators about the SAVE Act. You may know that they're already supporting it. Still send them a note. And if they are against it, also send them a note, because ultimately that is the issue we need to address. As we pointed out before, the latest CNN poll shows that 85% of white Americans, 82% of Latinos, and 76% of Black Americans, African Americans, favor a photo ID to vote. We've already talked about this today with Kevin McCullough, and the argument that this somehow disenfranchises minorities obviously is not the case. Reminds me of when President Bush used to use the term the soft bigotry of low expectations. We, of course, have a very helpful study. In Georgia, when they passed much more significant ID requirements, what happened? Well, they found that actually a record turnout in the next election. So again, we encourage you to visit the website, pointofview.net, find many of the articles we've talked about. Go to the section on Take Action. My Viewpoints commentary today on church attacks. We'll probably talk about some of that and some other issues tomorrow, but I would encourage you to go to the website, pointofview.net. Most importantly, I always want to thank Megan for help engineering the program. Steve, thank you for producing the program. Visit the website, take that action item right now and contact your 2 senators. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow right here on Point of View.
The Bible tells us not to worry, and yet there is a lot of worrying stuff in our world today. Thankfully, the Bible doesn't stop at telling us not to worry. God gives us a next step. He says we need to pray. But sometimes even knowing what to pray can be difficult, and that is why Point of View has relaunched our Pray for America movement, a series of weekly emails to guide you in prayer for our nation. Each week, you'll receive a brief update about a current issue affecting Americans, along with a written prayer that you can easily share with others. We'll also include a short free resource for you in each email so you can learn more about the issue at hand. Will you commit to pray for America? Go to pointofview.net. Click on the Pray for America banner at the top of the page to subscribe. Again, that's pointofview.net. Click on the Pray for America banner. Let's pray together for God to make a difference in America. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.